welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have a very special guest, Marybeth Colón. Marybeth is a partner at Smith, Thompson, Shaw, Colón, and Power. She has more than over 25 years of experience in bankruptcy and creditors' rights, real property law, and commercial litigation. She received her law degree from Florida State University with honors. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Marybeth Colón.
Hi, Courtney. Happy to be here.
I am thrilled to have you, Marybeth. I want to jump right into this conversation. So why don't you begin with a brief introduction and background of yourself?
Glad to. I'm Marybeth Colón. I grew up in the Florida Panhandle, about 15 miles from the Alabama border. You would call it LA, Lower Alabama, in a town of about 8 to 10,000 people. I went to Auburn University for my undergraduate work. I then attended 1 year of law school at Ole Miss and transferred to Florida State, where I finished with a law degree. I have been in Tallahassee practicing since 1999. I am married and I have one son who is 16.
That is fantastic, Marybeth. And I have to ask you, so you began your journey as far as an undergraduate degree in environmental design. So what influenced you to originally go in that particular direction?
Environmental design was a 4-year degree from the School of Architecture at Auburn. So growing up, art was a passion of mine, and mathematics was probably my favorite subject. So I combined the two and thought, I'll be an architect. And went to school, took my 4-year degree doing that and loved it. Got, I think, a very well-rounded education, everything from art to physics to mathematics, very broad, but then completely changed directions and went to law school.
That is incredible. You know, I always like starting out with the college experience and what people end up starting with, but then ultimately where their career actually takes them. I look back and I think to myself, I started off with advertising. And what was so interesting during my time at the University of Florida, I would go to my advisor all the time and I would just kind of flirt with the whole communication college. I mean, one time I was a communication major, the next day was like a PR major. And it got to the point where literally, unless I wanted to be there for 7 or 8 years, it was like, okay, you have to choose a specific degree. I could definitely say I never got an actual job in advertising, but I've used advertising, here and there. So I think it's always so interesting where people begin. And like you said, you had such a well-rounded knowledge and obviously gaining wisdom in very different areas, but then ultimately would lead you to go into law. So I'm very curious, from your background and where your foundation was laid, what started to interest you, and maybe when did law start to interest you to go in that direction?
Well, when I was in high school, there were 2 professions that I was just convinced I was going to be, either a lawyer or an architect. I shadowed both. Growing up, believe it or not, a town of 8,000 still had an architect, and I shadowed that architect, and I also shadowed an attorney. And I thought, architecture seems a little bit more interesting. So went that route in undergraduate. And then you get into your undergraduate degree and you get, in my case, I got to my last year and I sat here and thought, I'm probably not going to do this the rest of my life. This was not it. I love it. It's been fun. I love the knowledge I gained. I think it's very interesting, but I don't want to go to work and do this day in and day out. And I thought, okay, what else could I do? And it was, I'll try and be a lawyer now. So I just fell back on whatever my second choice had been growing up.
That's exciting. And, as you were speaking, I reflect on my life journey right out of college. And to your point, I had mentioned I didn't really go into advertising per se, of course, as my choice of major, but I ended up going into medical sales. And what's so interesting is a lot of people would always ask me, you have such a passion and like a love for sport. And how did you end up in that direction? And a lot of the times I feel our parents sometimes could certainly be a heavy influence on which direction we take in our career paths. And in my case, at the time, my dad was in medical sales. And so, generally speaking, of course, I didn't understand everything, at a younger age, but you were always around certain lingo being said or spoken. And so I ended up in that, direction right after, that was actually after my master's degree in communication. But I always like hearing about people's story and what particularly influences them, or if it was something that happened or they had an interaction with another individual that was in a different, career path, and it just sparked like a flame of interest. So here you are, you had already graduated law school, and then you enter into, as I mentioned before, a specialization, particularly in bankruptcy and creditors' rights, real property law, and commercial litigation. So what kind of persuaded you to go into these specific specializations?
Yeah, coming out of law school, the idea is you are trained to do absolutely everything in the legal field. And then a lot of, I think, what directs young attorneys is, where do you get a job?
Yeah.
In my case, I got a job in a small firm in Tallahassee, and that firm did bankruptcy work, which is the creditors' rights in bankruptcy, and they did commercial or civil litigation. So when I was learning how to actually apply what we had done in law school, that's what I was learning doing, whether it was a bankruptcy case or whether it was a civil litigation case. And that's just what I started out doing. Along the way, I did some other things. I did a little bit of criminal work. I learned very quickly that was not of interest to me. I liked the bankruptcy work. It put me in federal court. I liked the flow of a case. I liked helping people in those situations. So that kind of directed my career path. Had I landed in another firm doing something else, I could have taken a very different path. But that really set me in motion on what I was going to be practicing.
That is so interesting. And you obviously now today are a partner. And from my knowledge, I guess the natural progression would be junior associate, associate, senior associate, and then partner. I am so curious to hear your particular experience in your transitions as you would ultimately become partner in this law firm.
And that progression you mentioned, I think is very true if you're in a large national law firm. I happen to be in a local law firm now. We have 7 attorneys. So it's either you're an associate or you're a partner. There's really not that extended path. But having said that, when you come out of law school, your end goal is you do want to be a partner. It usually means more benefits, better pay, and more prestige. It also comes with more headaches. You don't think about that in law school, but it does come with those things. But it was an interesting progression. You put in a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of extra effort to get the recognition so that those at the top want you to become partner.
See, that's so interesting. And what was, like you mentioned, with different types of progressions in different law firms, how much time did it take you to ultimately become partner in this specific law firm?
In the firm I'm in now, I was here 4 years before I became a partner. I actually was a partner in my prior firm. I think I was there 3 years before I became a partner, but then I left. And so I started over here.
Wow, that's incredible. And speaking about the day-to-day tasks that you take on, Could you speak to what an average day looks like in your schedule, or you could just magnify it to what a week would look like typically in this position and role?
Of course, first and foremost, I'm an attorney. And so I have cases that those are going to take priority over anything administrative.
Sure.
A typical day starts out with emails. And while emails can be wonderful and you can communicate with people, they just pile up. And so a large part of my day is reading and responding to emails. Large part of my week is reading and responding to emails. I then also have a lot of telephone calls with various parties, whether it be a client or whether it be another attorney on the other side. You have those. I also spend a large amount of time drafting legal pleadings, making an argument to the court, something I'm going to file, taking a position on something. And then I have administrative stuff, making sure I have billed my time so that the firm is collecting money, responding to problems if someone hasn't paid their bill or they don't understand their bill, talking through that with the client, dealing with, are we adequately staffed? Is someone drowning in work? Do they need help? What do we need to do with that? Those are all things that come across the desk in an average week. Some weeks are better than others, as in at any profession, but it's just what you do. It's what you juggle.
See, that's so interesting to me. And as you reflect back, what is something maybe that surprised you in this particular position as a partner when you were working your way up that maybe you didn't expect, but once you got here, you were like, wow, I wish somebody would maybe have told me that or gave me more insight into this?
I think the administrative side of practice. As a law firm, just like any other business, there's a lot of things you do behind the scenes that are thankless and just time consuming, and they almost seem non-productive, but they're things that make everything work. That's something I don't think you realize when you step into the position, the problems you're going to have to deal with, the decisions you may be asked to make. It's just one of those things that doesn't come up in the conversation and the thought process as you're trying to get there. You're just so set on, I want to get there, that you don't realize, okay, now I'm here.
Wow. See, that's incredible. And, something that you mentioned, of course, your husband actually has his own business too. You have a son and you also are a career woman. So I'm so curious with speaking about, just like you said, like the average day, what that looks like and how many tasks are within that day. How do you find balance in your life as well as in your career?
Yeah, that's a juggling act. Some days I do a great job and hit a home run, and other days I fail miserably. And you just have to stop, regroup the next day. It is a juggling act. You do want to try and do it all. I think women probably struggle with that, maybe more so than others. We want to be there at every school event. We want to be there at every classroom event. We want to be the best we can in our career. And then you still want to be a wife. So you just have to try. It's just one of those things. You get up this day and think about what you have ahead of you and try and set aside time for the various roles that you're going to face that day.
See, that's wonderful. And I feel like that is certainly a topic of discussion that comes up heavily, like you said, particularly with women trying to juggle different roles, if you will, but then also desiring to be extremely successful in their career too. So could you provide maybe some advice for an individual that is maybe looking to go into law, or if they're already out of law and they're wondering which specialization to go into?
I think that one of the big things to realize is you have a limited amount of time.
Yeah.
I think when you're younger, you think I can do everything, no matter what. I can get it done. I can stay up to 3 a.m. every morning and get up the next day at 7 and go again. But a certain point in time, we all need our rest. We all need time for ourselves, even. And there are fields, I think, maybe law firm sizes too, that lend themselves to less of the I've got to work till 10 o'clock every night to bill the hours I need to. There's a trade-off. I think some firms probably are more understanding and make more concessions, but it's just one of those things you have to research and you have to find the place that feels right to you. A lot of times, if you are happy and you feel appreciated where you work, I think it makes it a whole lot easier to come in, do your job, and still have time for the other things that are important in your life.
Yeah. And I think that really is, I think that's so important to understand. Like you said, even different firms and how they function too. Are you there really early in the morning and still grinding at 9 or 10 at night trying to finish things? Or are you able to at least cap off at a reasonable time to be able to then show up, of course, the next morning? So I think that's very good advice. And another interesting point is you are part of a lot of professional associations and you also have a lot of memberships. I just want to list a couple and we'll get into several of them speaking into detail. You are part of the Northern District of Florida Bankruptcy Bar Association, the Florida Association of Women Lawyers, Tallahassee Women Lawyers, American Bankruptcy Institute, and the National Association of Bankruptcy Trustees. So, my question to you is when you were desiring to be part of these professional associations, how did you go about being able or to choose these, but then also being able to maintain all of the membership and being part of these professional memberships alongside your daily tasks that you do every day in your work?
Yeah. Some of them, the meetings are few and far between. So that makes it very easy. With the modern world and COVID and what it brought us, Zoom and things such as this, you can attend a lot of things or participate in a lot of educational courses that you couldn't do before. It has made it so easy to sit at a desk, sit on the sofa, and still participate in something. One of the associations that I'm a member of, I'm actually on their journal editorial board. And so we have a Zoom meeting once a month to talk about what's coming up in the next issue, things we need to address. And so you're meeting with people throughout the country. So really technology has made it, I think, so much easier to be involved and stay involved in organizations that help you do your job or that provide you with mentors and role models to follow.
That's wonderful. And I just want to go off on a quick tangent, just real quick. In your daily work, how did COVID affect that? Were you able now to go onto Zoom to do certain things? Just as you mentioned that with those professional associations, I was thinking about that. Did it actually affect you in your daily life for your career?
Definitely it did. With one side, and then with another side, didn't affect it at all. So I do real estate closings and I do bankruptcy work. With the real estate closings, you have to actually sign your paperwork. So we still had people coming in every day to buy and sell homes. Some people didn't come up to our office. We may have done it. They were in the car and we had a clipboard. Others came up to the office. It was standard practice to keep going like we were. On the reverse side, the bankruptcy court, it closed. Federal court shut down and we went to telephonic hearings, which eventually improved to Zoom hearings. So you no longer went to the courtroom to have a hearing. You either appeared by phone or by Zoom.
Wow. Okay, I have many questions. So What is your perspective of being able to, like you said, being able to do things now on Zoom? And I am very passionate about communication, about body language to make sure that there's no misinterpretations or miscommunications. So, how did that relate to your area in law? And what have you seen change? Do you enjoy now being able to do it by Zoom, or would you rather be in person?
I have mixed emotions.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you a direct answer there. Um, with with hearings, I miss the in person. I miss being able to look at the judge and the other parties in the courtroom to see how they're reacting to what's being made, what arguments being made. I also miss a lot of times you would talk to the other side before a hearing because you're both there, you're in person. It's just so different to talk to someone face to face than it is on the phone, through email, or via Zoom. So I miss those interactions because I think a lot of things got resolved. I think a lot of things got clarified when you could deal with people face to face and in person. On the flip side, in my role as a Chapter 7 trustee, I covered Pensacola, Panama City, and Tallahassee. So in those cases where I had to go to Pensacola and Panama City on a monthly basis, it saved me a lot of time sitting in the car. I mean, to Pensacola and back, there's 6 hours of my day that now I have back. So I love Zoom for that. I love the telephone for that because it made it possible for me to get more done in the day and not have to sit in the car.
I think that's a good point. Like when you look at different situations, there's always pros and cons to different things. So I'm always interested to see how the experience that COVID left all of us, how that really did affect different areas or different industries and how people literally communicated. And so I want to take it back around. That was, I apologize on my behalf. I took that tangent out pretty long.
That's fine.
But circling back around to those professional associations that you're part of, would you mind speaking a little bit more in depth, particularly on the National Association of Bankruptcy Trustees?
Yes, that's an organization that is filled with individuals like myself throughout the United States and Puerto Rico, actually, and the other areas like that. These are attorneys or CPAs that serve as Chapter 7 panel trustees. And some people have been doing it 40 years. Other people, have been doing it my amount of time, some less. Their mission is to promote what we do, educate trustees, and lobby for trustees as far as issues that affect us. It's been a phenomenal organization. I joined it right when I was appointed to the panel. And for someone going from a debtor's attorney or a creditor's attorney to being a Chapter 7 panel trustee, it was a completely different position. There were things that I didn't even know I needed to think about. It was wonderful in helping me learn. And to this day, it's wonderful. There are so many people who have had similar issues or dealt with similar problems, and they're so willing to share their knowledge and help others. It's been a really phenomenal group to be a part of.
That's wonderful. And just speaking more broadly, like as to what you were saying, I think it's so important to be part of associations where people have a tremendous amount of experience, upwards to maybe 40 years of experience in a specific area. And just by hearing maybe the stories that they could share from their experience, you could learn so much. I mean, just all the wisdom, especially if you're starting out. And that was something, I mean, I've always just been such an advocate for you gaining as much of experience as you can. If it is joining, I just speak about in college, but, academic clubs, any type of groups or associations to begin that networking, because in this world, at least in my opinion, it's such a small world where when you get out, I mean, for me, I went from medical sales back to academia, and a lot of people were like, where did that happen, Court? But it was that idea, just like we were speaking at the beginning, where all of a sudden maybe you want to go in a different direction. And if you have that network, and if you're part of maybe a specific association, you could at least ask questions about different paths that people may have taken. What would be your advice when it comes to professional associations? Maybe those, not even like going into the law route, but just in general, what is your opinion on joining professional associations and memberships?
I think they're definitely rewarding and worth the time, effort, monies you pay. Um, the mentorship, the camaraderie just can't be replaced with anything else. It puts you in touch with people, like you were saying, that you hear their stories, you can relate, you just learn so much that it's going to take you years to learn on your own. So it's definitely worth the effort and time to join those groups.
Wonderful. And, as you were speaking, you spoke about obviously mentorship. When you were first starting out, did you actually have a formal mentor as you were going through your early stages?
Um, I mean, two people I can think of that have been mentors. When I first got out of law school and took my position, it was a small law firm. There were 4 attorneys. The senior managing partner was really a mentor. Not only did he give me my assignments, but he really would talk you through things, work you through things, and give you opportunities to learn, give you opportunities to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, but also just really helped you along the way. Gave you a lot of work. There were times where you wanted to run away from him, but at the same time, he really did teach you a lot that I wouldn't have learned had I just been sitting somewhere else in a larger firm doing research. So that was wonderful. Then when I came on the panel as a Chapter 7 trustee, there was another trustee in town that had been on the panel for 10 years, and she really took me under her wing and helped me. Helped me learn some of the ropes. If I had a question, I could always pick up the phone and call her. So that just was just a wonderful resource to have. So not really formal mentors, but people that reached out or that just because of who they were there to help.
I think that's so important in life is having, like you said, even if it's not necessarily a formal mentor, but being able to ask questions to one who obviously has that wisdom and knowledge from just years of experience, because we all get to a certain point where you are going to need help. We're all human beings, right? I could say for myself,
Definitely.
I'm always asking questions. But I like that you mentioned that, though, just the importance of mentorship and having a mentor, especially when you're starting in a specific career path that maybe you don't have, obviously, that experience quite yet. And so I also wanted to speak about the Northern District of Florida Bankruptcy Bar Association. Why did you join that, and what has it helped you with throughout the years?
The Northern District Bankruptcy Bar Association is our local organization for the Northern District of Florida, which would be Pensacola to Gainesville.
Okay.
So it is attorneys in that, attorneys either in the area or that practice in our area. And it's a wonderful group of people. I really think if you're practicing anywhere and there's an association in that area of practice, it's almost a must to join because it just puts you in touch with people that you are going to be dealing with day in and day out. It also, in this group, we have an annual seminar every year, and for continuing legal education, and the information that we learn is just so helpful. It can be so specific to the courts we practice in, whether it's procedural changes, whether it's just ministerial changes, but it keeps you informed. It keeps you informed with things that you're not having to go read 10 pages of here's the new amendments. We're going to have a meeting, or they're going to do a newsletter, and here's some more information. Here's tidbits to help you. It's just, again, to make your practice, I think, flow better, and to put you in touch with people, just to develop those relationships with people that you're going to be dealing with.
And I think that's so important when you were speaking. Continuing your education, no matter what particular area you go into, you may reach the pinnacle. However, everything's always evolving, everything's always changing. And so, like you said, being part of these associations and professional memberships, to your point, can maybe even help you, like you said, cut back on time, that you're not having to read certain chapters, particularly maybe within the realm of law, but that you could go to maybe seminars to be able to gain that information and still stay up with what you do need to know within your particular area of law. And as we take a transition, we spoke about it a little bit, but family life. I always love to speak career, but then I just love to always hear people's story of how they balance both. And you have a son now that's in high school. So, Marybeth, can you maybe speak to the experiences that he has had in general? And then we'll maybe jump into sport in particular and how that's impacted his life.
Okay. And sports has been a huge impact. We have an only child, and ever since he was little, he was more fond of activities that included more people. So he did not like the individualized sports. He always wanted to go play a team sport. And we have landed to where we're to one sport now, but it's been a defining influence in his life. It's what he loves. It's his passion. It's taught him so many lessons. It's taught, I think, his father and I so many lessons. Just seeing him, learn through that process. And it's taken a lot of our time. A lot of decisions you make revolve around, okay, how can we make it work so he can do this? Or how can we make it work so he can do that? And it helps to have extended family. We are blessed. My parents are an hour away, and my husband's parents are actually here now. They moved here 4 years ago. So to have, other people that can help make getting him here, there, and everywhere possible.
Now, two things that I drew from what you were saying was just as you were ending, the importance of a support system. And sometimes when we look at the big picture, we realize how important it is. It takes a village, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, just like you said, getting them to certain practices on time, making sure that schoolwork's done. I always like to pay tribute to that support system, whether it is the parents, the grandparents, the extended family, because that community, I think, is really, really important to achieving many goals in life, whether that be it for the child or just the family in general. And then you also mentioned, if I caught it correctly, did he do multiple sports at least one point in time? And how did that maybe influence his life before he then started focusing on one?
He did do multiple sports. At one point, he was into baseball and soccer. And two different sets of skills, I think, but and two different groups of friends. I think that was one of the really neat things about it. Instead of being around the same people again and again playing just one sport, you had a mixture of people that were completely different. And I think lessons different. Baseball was a little more maybe focused on the individual as far as performance, and maybe soccer a little less, although I don't know that that's right as I say it now, but both were very positive experiences, but they're hard to keep up with. In today's world, as a mother, it's one of my complaints, I think, with all the travel, ball, and various things that are in place, it's hard for kids to play multiple sports and do it to a high level. You almost have to just sacrifice and limit yourself to one.
You know, Mary Beth, you literally, I was going to go in that direction of traveling, at least from what I've heard. And let me take it actually from my experience first, and then I'll transition into that.
Mhm.
But even in early 2000s, I really focused on the sport of gymnastics. At one point in my life in high school, I did do a variety of different sports, but I would have to say ultimately was gymnastics. And looking back, my father had raised me as a single parent. And I think to myself, how did he do it? I mean, we would fly cross country all the time for meets. And granted, we did have that sense of family in the gym. So certainly if one parent could not go, the other, stood in, the child of
Mhm.
course went with the other family. And it was that support system again that was important. But I look back and I think of all the traveling that was involved. And then now you lead up to present day. And I've certainly heard stories, but it seems like the level of competition within youth sports, maybe into those early adolescent years, is, from your perspective, and you just mentioned it, but do you think it's extremely intense to maintain certain levels for the adolescent?
I do. I do think it is. With all these travel teams, whether you're in baseball, whether you're in soccer, whatever you're in, if you're going to be that top level and push to be the best, you've got to do the travel. You can't just play for your school. There are even some leagues and things that if you play in, you can't play for your school. They prohibit you from playing for a high school. So it's changing youth sports. I don't know if it's for the better. They definitely get more competition. They definitely get more practice. But at the same time, I think they miss out on some things. I think there is a benefit to having participated in multiple sports. The skills you learn, competitions, it's just different.
Absolutely. And from the beginning, like I said, your son's in high school now, but even taking it back to just maybe middle school years, that transition and what you've seen maybe within him change working with a team and seeing that influence and impact that sport brings, is there anything that really stands out as far as your perspective from a parent in the lessons that he has learned?
Definitely. Disappointment, losses. My son is a goalkeeper on a soccer team. So you either can be the hero or you can be.
I hear you.
You can, yeah. So that's been interesting because no one can do everything perfect every time. So learning how to bounce back, how to mess up and get back up and go again. I think that's one of the biggest lessons that sports teaches us. When you, in soccer, in the case of when you let a goal in, how do I get back up and then have enough composure to know that I've got to make that next save? That's definitely been the biggest lesson, whether he was in middle school or even elementary school. When little kids lose in elementary school, it's so common to see all the tears. And for those young kids to learn how to deal with it, that it's not the end of the world that we lost today. We've got another game next week. Those are just great lessons to learn because in life, not everything goes your way. In the practice of law, I can't win every case I take. I'm going to be wrong sometimes. I'm going to lose a case. And how do you handle it? And how do you rebound? And how do you keep going? So that's something that sports has been instrumental in teaching him.
That is wonderful. And I always like hearing the lessons learned in sport and how they transition into life lessons to help you later on in your career. I was thinking about something when you were speaking gymnastics. I wrote a blog about this, but there's so much truth to it where talk about like falling and having to pick yourself back up. I mean, you would literally do face plants sometimes on these mats and talk about, a slice of humble pie delivered to you, like picking yourself back up and having to, continue that repetition until you perfect that skill. But as you're going through it, you don't really realize the level of resilience that you're building, the level of perseverance that you're also instilling in your own self to when you do move forward in your professional career. And to your point, something doesn't work out as planned the way it's supposed to work out in your mind,
Exactly.
right? So I love speaking about just life lessons learned in sport. I do. I just think it's great to hear from your perspective as a parent and watching your child grow and develop through life. And speaking of which, since he is in high school, you have probably, I'd have to assume, if I'm getting the age correctly, you have traveled through maybe different types of colleges and started looking at colleges. So, what has that experience been like?
Um, that has really hit this summer. My son is going into his junior year, and we are still playing soccer, still, living the dream, hoping one day we can play college soccer. Whether that comes to fruition or not, we will see. But that's been interesting to see him so engaged with a goal and doing things to try and meet that goal. Even having phone conversations with college coaches to hear a child that, maybe doesn't say very many words when I see him after work. It's like pulling teeth to get him to tell me how his day was. And now he's on a phone call with somebody, he has no idea who they are, just telling them all kinds of things. So it's been very interesting to see how he's working towards a goal and what he's willing to do and how he's willing to improve.
I think, something as you mentioned this, at least from my perspective, what I've heard is the level of competition as far as like being admitted into these colleges is certainly starting to become more competitive. I mean, I even think when I entered in 2006 into University of Florida, that was competitive back then. And so I know students today in high school, it seems like they're taking AP courses, their grade point averages is just skyrocketing. And so, I mean, I'm left out, like I said, in left field, in just understanding how things are evolving. So, could you maybe speak to what you're seeing and in your perception of the level of competition for being admitted into college?
The level of competition, from what I have heard, also is just it's changed so much. Of course, I went to college it's years ago, but now kids, they want to take, 10, 15 AP courses. They want 200, 300 service hours. It's just, it's that resume builder. And some of the stuff I think is great and wonderful and it's teaching them things. And then other times I think, oh, this is just so you can be on your resume and you're really not getting anything out of it. But in today's world, it is definitely different, the landscape. I've heard so many horror stories about kids that, are in Florida, they made great grades and they can't get into UF or FSU. And used to, if you made great grades and you were in state, you got in. And that's not the case anymore. So you kind of have to, I think, prepare your child be open to possibilities. Not just have that single one thing or one place they have to go, but to be open to what comes about, whether, it's here or somewhere else.
No, I think that's excellent advice because it is, I think it's important to always have an open mind. And, we had discussed it before. Sometimes when you're just focusing on the way that you believe life should go, and say it doesn't, but to be able to pick yourself back up and at least explore different options too. So that's great advice. And just in general, Marybeth, could you maybe speak to some advice, whether that be life advice or career advice, from your perspective, just for the audience?
I think this is about positivity, but definitely look for the positive. There are always things that are going to happen that don't go as you thought they should have, or tragedies or, bad things, but you just have to realize there are positives that can come out of negative situations, and be willing to embrace that.
Yes.
I think, in your personal life, in your career, I think those are things to always look for.
No, I think that's excellent advice. And, from my opinion with positivity, I mean, no doubt we all have our days, but one thing I've been more cognizant of with myself even is if in fact something negative does come up, or a sense of negativity, if you will, but to really focus on your mindset and going back to that sense of even gratefulness. Like, what do you have in your present moment? That may be a factor, but we're not going to deal with that right now. But being more centered and being grateful where you are, that you woke up the next day and that you're able to make it better. I think those are the small things that I know I have definitely been more mindful of, and being very cognizant when a negative thought, if it does enter into my mind, to be able to switch it off and to be like, no, we're not going to let this ruin the whole day. We are going to be positive and moving forward. So I love that advice. And, I had to ask you, Marybeth. So like you said, you have over 20 years of experience within the specialization of law. So what is the future for you, Marybeth? What do you hope the future to be for yourself in law?
Uh, Probably another 20 years. I'd like to practice another 20 years. And in the field of bankruptcy, I like what I do. And closings, real estate closings, they're very different. Some can be very happy, some can be very sad, the situations people find themselves in. But to be able to treat people with respect and make the process understandable and smoother for them to get through, so long as they're following the rules and doing the things they have to do, I think I enjoy doing that. So I hope I have 20 more years of doing this.
That is so exciting. And, I had to ask you one particular question from what you were saying. And as you are in different areas, such as bankruptcy or closings, when there can be a lot of emotional stress, over the years, how did you evolve in being able to really connect with others if it unfortunately maybe was a closing because of a divorce or because of a death? How were you able to connect with them over time with experience?
I think being aware of the emotions in the room, reading people's body language, how they're responding to you, whether it's, quick, flippant answers or they're wanting to talk, just being aware and going with the flow. Sometimes people come in and they just need to tell you their story. They need to vent to someone, and being there for that so that you can help get them through. Other times they just don't understand it. They don't understand what's going on, and they just want someone to explain it to them. So really just being aware of the feedback you're getting from the other person and how to respond to that. You can't go in and do a closing the exact same every time. You've just got to go with the flow a little more.
No, I think that's wonderful advice. And I think even just in life, when we're interacting with one another, whether that be an interpersonal communication, but self-awareness, and to your point, that body language, and we certainly spoke about it before, but how that even delivers like a quote voice in itself without even having to speak sometimes is the body language. So Marybeth, we always like to end with a positive quote or maybe phrase. So what is something maybe that really resonates with you when you need that like dose of encouragement?
Your attitude determines your direction.
Ooh, I love that.
And I really think it does. If you have an attitude that you're open to things, that you're positive, it's really going to affect where you go. If you're negative, it's definitely going to affect where you go to. So I think just attitude's such a big thing, and we can control it. It just takes effort, energy, and practice.
I think that's so important is Which you mentioned, just attitude, but especially in like a team setting. And I'm sure obviously being part of like a law firm too, but how that can translate into career is being able to work with people, but keeping and maintaining that positive attitude. And like I said, I think it's so important that you've always focus on that positive nature. There's always going to be challenges that arise. There's going to be issues that everybody has to deal with in life, but being able to maintain that high level of positivity, I think could really make a difference in one's life. So Marybeth, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Plenty of Positivity podcast. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge within the realm of law. So once again, Marybeth, thank you.
Thank you, Courtney.